Hi, everyone. My name is Catherine Batista with the Alliance, and I'd like to welcome you all to our first practice sharing webinar of the new year. So first and foremost, I'd like to welcome our supplier affiliate members to this call. As you should be aware of by now, our practice sharing webinars are going to be attended by both our supplier affiliate members and our utility members. So we'd like to encourage both groups to present on these calls. So if you are a supplier affiliate member and would like to present, then you will need to submit a call for paper, and you can do so by going onto our website and answering the questions that we have listed there under our call for paper section. So that portal to submit those call for papers is open year round, but we will be actively reaching out and reminding the supplier affiliate members to submit that call for paper during the month of February. So February 28th will then be our due date in order to be considered for the next round of our topic selection for these practice sharing webinars. So members of the practice sharing team are going to be meeting shortly after that February 28th due date to review any submissions that have been received. And we will plan to pick topics for our upcoming webinars in May, June, and August. So currently we do have topics selected for our February and March webinars, and those came from a call for paper round that happened in November 2018. And you should have also received registration details for those webinars. So if you haven't received those, please do reach out to us and we'll make sure that you get added to those calls. And then if there are any members out there who are interested in sharing a best practice, I'll probably reach out to you. But if you are interested, please do shoot me an email and I will make sure to include your topic in our selection process. So one more announcement, supplier affiliate members should have also received a notice last week of an opportunity to join both our conference and survey teams. So if you are interested in influencing this year's survey or our conference agenda, we encourage you to send a short email to us expressing your interest for joining those teams. And we will plan to select 3 supplier affiliates to join each team. So I encourage you all to express your interest and get involved with the Alliance work team because we're very interested in having you as members. So before we get started with the webinar, we do this before all of our calls. So I'll just read the Alliance's antitrust statement. We want to advise all participants that these meetings and all activities related to the Electric Utility Industry Sustainable Supply Chain Alliance are subject to compliance with all federal and state antitrust laws. We will not discuss any company-specific pricing, vendor terms and conditions, discounts, or anything else that may affect prices, allocation of markets, specific vendor experiences, or any other competitively sensitive information. All right, so for those of you who don't know how this typically works, you are all muted today. So if you do have any questions for our presenters, we will be taking those at the end of their presentation. And if you do have a question, please type it into the chat box in the GoToWebinar window there, and I will make sure to relay them to our presenters when the time comes. So with that, let me introduce our speaker. Today, we're going to be hearing from Michael Jones-Bay and his team at Con Edison. So Michael, I'll just hand it over to you to introduce your team and discuss your topic.
Well, thank you, Catherine, and Happy New Year, everyone. I'm proud to introduce our team, led by team lead Paola Curzan and Christian Ayala. We also have the manager for that section, Amy Becker, on hand. We'll be discussing our zero scrap cable program and how we've been able to create a closed loop process by collaborating with our cable vendor to save money, reduce waste, material handling, storage needs, and our carbon footprint, not to mention enhanced safety. So without further ado, I turn it over to our team.
All right, good afternoon all. My name is Christian Ayala. I'm actually a procurement specialist here at Con Edison, and I'm joined here, as Michael mentioned, by Paola Iturbe. So I want to welcome you to Con Edison's WebEx presentation on our Zero Scrap program in support of our sustainability goals and implementing a closed loop process. In addition to our sustainability goals, these types of programs focus on upholding our company's three guiding principles: safety, operational excellence, and the customer experience. With the inception of the program, all three principles were sufficiently met along with our sustainability goals, which will be displayed throughout the presentation. But before delving into the program, we just wanted to provide a little background on how our process worked before the Zero Scrap program was implemented. So at Con Edison, our cable material is divided up into two cable streams. One cable stream being consignment cable and the other being non-consignment cable. Where consignment cable is material we as a company do not hold title to. Non-consignment cable is material Con Edison has outright bought from our suppliers. For the purposes of this presentation, the focus will be on short balance consignment cable with unusable cable lengths of 200 feet or less. It is important to note, however, that with our consignment cable, we do not buy the full cable reel outright. Instead, we pay our cable supplier for the footage we use in our jobs. So due to the size and aging cable infrastructure of the territories Con Edison services, a large number of service jobs would naturally yield a large number of consignment short cable balances at our company storerooms. These storerooms would, on any given day, collectively average around 250 short balance consignment cable reels, which would result in severe cluttering. This cluttering would require our employees to touch multiple reels multiple times in order to get to any one specific reel, increasing the risk of a workplace-related injury in the instance the reel wasn't properly secured. The quality of inventory accuracy was also a challenge before program implementation. One can imagine the man-hours it would require to take an accurate inventory of those cable reels to determine which ones could still be used in the field versus those balances which would require scrapping by our recycler, and coordinating that amongst our regional storerooms. So now here we are with cluttered yards, difficulty tracking accurate inventory, increased safety risk of moving multiple reels, and now add in the fact we had all this cable material to be scrapped. Now historically, when it came to scrapping short balance consignment cable, we outright bought the remaining short balance footage at a cost. We then cut the cable into smaller lengths and dumped it into a 30, 40-yard cable dumpster to be processed by our recycler for revenue. This in itself presented a new challenge where the specific reel consisting of only one cable specification would now be commingled with other cable specifications generated from other jobs. Due to the commingling, we could no longer rely on the accuracy of the cable specification to tell us how much copper could be recovered from the material. So instead, we had to rely on the recycler's own assessment of how much copper the entire cable dumpster could yield and allow them to pay us accordingly. This was an outright control issue we had identified and needed a resolution on. So here, enter our Zero Scrap program negotiated with our cable supplier. So in a nutshell, the idea was to essentially give the manufacturer of the cable the remaining short balance being held at our yards and let them either repurpose the material or scrap it themselves. We now knew the potential value of what we were sending back to the manufacturer due to the fact that each reel contained only one cable engineering specification with an estimated copper poundage per foot of cable. Using this copper recovery estimate and what we used to pay historically, we came up with a negotiated administrative restocking fee in lieu of purchasing the short balance outright, cutting the material, and then scrapping through another process. So from a logistical perspective, these short balance reels have been returned to our cable supplier on a weekly basis utilizing the same trucks for new deliveries, and have assisted us in creating a manual centralized process to track our consignment cable inventory and coordinate reel pickups by the supplier. So now to further walk you through the program's impact, I will now turn it over to my colleague, Paula Iturbe.
Thank you, Christian. And so we can go to the next slide. This is showing the evident impact that the Zero Scrap program has had in our overall storerooms network. So when we started the program, I believe it was mid-August or end of August. That's when we started the program. And like Christian was mentioning, we were carrying an average of 250 short balance reels that you can see there. There's a drop starting in August, and then September, October, and so on. And so we were able to reduce the number of short balance reels to, well, today we're at 0. It's pretty much once we identify a short balance reel, we send it out immediately to our manufacturer, cable manufacturer, because they're constantly every week supplying cable reels. So in the same trucks, like Christian was mentioning, they take the not empty, but the short balance reels back, and they take care of it. So we no longer have to touch them. So the next slide as well, if we jump to the next slide, please. So it shows one of our cable yards. So this was, we should have put the before and after. This is the after, but before, this whole yard was full of cables. And so as you can imagine, I mean, it looks pretty full right now, but they're probably mostly full cable reels, so that none of these are short balances. So before, this whole cable yard was filled up with reels, and as you can imagine, it was a challenge when, because of the lack of space, you needed to get the cable reel that was on the back, so you needed to play Tetris with all of these cable reels to get the cable that you needed, the specification that you needed. So now this has, like Christian was saying, decluttered or removed some, cleared up some space from our yards, and not just College Point, but everywhere in our 17 locations. Now, I believe this summarizes what we've done with the Zero Scrap program. So I think we can go now to the questions. Do you guys have any questions regarding what we did?
Sure. So I just want to remind everyone that you are muted. So if you do have any questions, please type them into that chat box. But I know I have a question for you, Michael, actually. I know that you are a big advocate for estimating the cost savings from sustainability initiatives. So I want to know if you have any details there that you guys can share on the cost savings that this initiative has helped you guys realize. Michael, if you're talking, it looks like you're muted.
Sorry about that. Carla, do you have those numbers?
Yes. So with this program, we were able to save an average of $500,000 annually, and that's because, yeah, we're paying less for the cable. We're also saving money by the fact that we know what the cable specifications, what the metal content of those specs are, so we're able to recover 100% of it.
That's
Also,
great.
in addition to cost savings, about how much of the yard that we're able to reclaim?
I believe the number was roughly around, I believe, about 12,000 square feet of yard space.
That's great.
All right, so we've had a couple of questions come in. The first one, what was the biggest challenge in relaying this new initiative across your 17 locations?
Do you want to take that one? Or, okay, so I'll take a shot at it. So one of the biggest challenges, I would say, is coordination. The program itself, it's not rocket science, I guess, but it's more the coordination among our 17 storerooms, and especially that we did all of this program within 2 weeks. We had a problem with our previous scrap vendor, and so we had to come up with a quick solution. So I believe we put this program in place we thought about it and figured out all the processes within like 3 days. Of course, this was a very collaborative effort among storerooms, purchasing, the materials team, lots of people were the suppliers themselves as well. And so within 3 days, we were able to identify what we wanted to do, and then in another week, we actually implemented. So I guess its coordination was the biggest challenge.
Thanks for that. Another question, is a credit issued for the short balance reels? And is the price recovered still considered scrap?
So in regards to the consignment cable specifically, because if that's the case, then there is no credit associated with it at all. And essentially any kind of like credits we would realize isn't considered scrap anymore, since we don't hold title to that material.
So no, there is no credits on this program being issued. So what we do is, because remember, we're only doing this for consignment cables. So we don't hold title, we don't hold the inventory in our books. So that means we can return it to the manufacturer. So whatever remains on that reel, whatever short balance is on that reel, we give it back to them. And we do pay them, though, what we call a restocking fee. And that restocking fee is, we calculate it by saying how much we would have paid for the remaining cable on that reel minus what the metals that would be recovered. Although we don't recover that metal, that's up to the manufacturer to recover it, but we just pay that difference. So we call it a restocking fee. No credits here.
Okay, and there's another question that came in. Can you elaborate on the difference in scrap versus what the manufacturer does with the cable from an environmental perspective?
As it relates to our normal scrapping process, whenever we have jobs that require any kind of like pull-out cable or yield these pull-out cables, we're pretty much recycling with our current recycler right now. And before becoming a recycler at Con Edison, there are a couple of approval processes that we have to actually undertake. We have to focus on our environmental health and safety department has to kind of weigh in on the approval of the facilities. When it comes to transportation of said material, there's a separate approval for that. So just when it comes to the normal scrapping process, there are a lot of kind of environmental hoops that we have to go through before actually sending our material absolutely anywhere. The difference with the consignment cable program is, since we don't own title to that material, since we don't hold title to that material, we're not necessarily, I would say, held to the same kind of standards. We let our cable recycler pretty much scrap or repurpose the material as they see fit. I don't know if that answered your question, but.
And there was just one clarification question from the same individual. So they said, so this is a zero scrap. Apologies. So this is a zero scrap on the consigned portion of cable / reels. What are you doing with your purchased cable reels that you own?
So they're being scrapped currently by our recycler, and that recycler pretty much has to get approval from our environmental health and safety department before processing any of our material. And if there's any kind of let's say hazardous material present, then they have to provide us with certificates of destruction. They have to have certain requisite certifications, things of that nature. It depends on the material that you're processing.
Okay, another question. Was the $500,000 savings solely from the cable savings, or did that include any savings from personnel redeployment?
No, it's just purely from the cable savings, from the difference of price. No personnel reductions or anything like that.
Okay, and one more question. What is/was the profile of total inventory when you began this effort? I believe we answered that on slide 3, so I'll just flip to that. But they just want to know how much was consigned and how much do you have on hand that you own now?
Oh, I would need to check that, but because in slide 3 we do see that on average we had 250 short balance reels, and then today I believe it's pretty much 0. But for the non-consignment inventory, I don't have the data right now with me.
Did you guys track any data on safety? Were there any safety benefits that were realized through this initiative?
Some of the safety benefits realized from it is just making sure the yard is less cluttered. So in general, it's easier to get through the yard, to pull cable, not having to move as many things. So potential reduction of forklift injuries, motor vehicle injuries, things like that. Just getting stuck between a couple reels, anything like that to walk through, because all 17 regional storerooms, if you can imagine, in New York City are quite tight, and we have very little space, so it allowed for the people to move through there, the storeroom people, in a safer manner.
Great, and I think we'll just take one more question, and I think this is a good one to close off the webinar. But how has this successful program inspired Con Ed to reduce and recycle other utility materials or other investment recovery type of materials like this?
I think we're still looking at sustainability, recycling, kind of holistically, right? So historically, it seemed as though every waste stream was kind of handled in silos, right? So this kind of opened our eyes to say, hey, you know what? If we can create a program that can handle just our consignment cable, why can't we expand it to, I don't know, wood pole recycling? It could be our non-consignment cable, our electronics, things of that nature. So it definitely opened our eyes that our program has to kind of evolve, with the times. So, all good things, all good things.
All right, so it looks like we don't have any further questions. I want to just thank everyone for joining today, and thanks again to Con Ed for taking the time to present on our first practice sharing webinar of the new year. We did have an individual ask about whether these slides would be available after the call, and we do record these sessions, so we will be sure to send you a link to those recordings. Did you have a question, Michael, before I close this?
Just wanted to make a friendly offer.
Sure.
Any of the utilities on the line like to continue the conversation, would be more than happy to continue sharing.
Great, thanks, Michael. Yeah, so just a reminder to everyone on the call, our next practice sharing webinar will be at 2 p.m. Eastern Time on February 19th. And on that call, we're going to be hearing from one of our supplier affiliate members, United Rentals. So they'll be discussing the management of equipment utilization. So the goal of that presentation is to walk away with a better understanding of where to look for opportunities to improve efficiencies in-house, and what key performance indicators to monitor, and how to leverage total control to drive productivity improvements. So please do register for that call. And one more, I just wanted to say thank you again for joining, and I hope everyone has a great rest of your afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.